What's the good word, Josh? It's your boy DKB here. So we are breaking down what I think our 53-man roster will look like, building our practice squad as much as we can, and I guess overall just kind of covering Jets news as we normally do, right? We're coming off of the New York Giants preseason game, finishing our preseason 2-2. We did fairly well, right? The Giants ended up resting quite a few of their starters, but in true fashion with what we've seen for the majority of this preseason, our starters, for the first time that we're seeing them, and our second stringers definitely seem capable of playing with mostly anybody in the NFL. We've dominated the first half of a lot of these games, and then once we got into our third string players, our undrafted free agents, then things got a little bit more shakier. Chatted about this a little bit before, right? Obviously, execution is going to be at a premium. There's a reason some of these bottom tier guys are going to be bottom tier, but nonetheless, I think this season again will be interesting because we're going to see a lot of guys that are probably going to be strong role players for other teams. Or they're going to be core starters for, some guys, just before the season starts, which means for us, we're going to have to let go of some strong candidates once again. We had 7 guys that got scooped up last year. We could probably beat that number this year just off the strength of some of the people we're going to cut in our defensive line room alone. But yeah, we'll see. The idea is going to be obviously to try to retain as much key talent overall as possible. This is a season, in my opinion, where we can't have the luxury of trying to hold on to certain guys and stash them, at least on our 53-man roster like we did last year with a guy like Tony Adams, per se. With the expectations in the championship window that we currently have with Aaron Rodgers, we need to maximize everything from top down. So that'll be the goal. What I ended up doing to actually switch some things up this year is that we are pretty much randomizing the name, right? I'm not just going through the depth chart or, the full roster as normal. I'm going to see what comes up as random. We're going to slot the guys in at wherever I think they would fit in on the depth chart, and obviously kind of build our 53-man roster that way. 1 second. Cool. So yeah, that'll be the game plan. Let me go ahead and actually get this pulled up as well. All right, so I believe there should be 89 or 90 names on here, right? Just by virtue of, I know we released somebody right before the Giants game. And I can't remember who it was off the top of my head. Want to say it was a cornerback. I could be wrong about that. But either way, 89 or 90 names. We'll see how long it takes us to run through. Ideally pretty quick though. For the record though, with what it counts for practice squad, because there's been a few different conversations that we've had, not only on the Jets Flight Squad podcast, but also with some other guys that have popped in, Tigo, Green Bean, I want to say I've heard like Jet Central mention different things. There's going to be a couple main rules for us to be aware of here, right? The first one is going to be, we can fill up the practice squad with 16 players. There's various rules defining experience and who can stay on that roster and who can't. For instance, you can have any number of 16 players who haven't accrued at least 9 games in the NFL season. You can have up to 4 players who have accrued no more than 2 NFL seasons. And then you can have up to 6 players with no limitation on experience whatsoever. And then outside of that, the protection rules have changed in recent years. So we can designate up to 4 players each week that'll be protected, meaning they can't be poached by an NFL team, even if they get offered a contract to the active 53-man roster, which clearing up that piece is huge for me because that means that we can actually come in and we can sneak on. We can sneak a couple of guys onto the roster that if we didn't have this in place, you'd be trying desperately to try to keep them onto the roster. So let's go ahead and kick things off on our side. So our first name up. Okay, so tight end Jeremy Ruckert. Okay, so we generally know at least of right now, he's pretty much locked in as tight end 3, right? There's been nothing close to a competition from any of the guys behind him regarding basically challenging him for that tight end 3 spot. So that's exactly where I would slot him into. Obviously, I've mentioned quite a bit my affinity for him moving up the depth chart and potentially taking over CJ's job. And with that thinking in mind, that could still potentially happen. But as of right now, we're going to go ahead and slot him in as my tight end 3. What's good, Dart? All right, so let's keep it moving. A lot of these guys I feel like are going to be pretty obvious, at least once we jump into the starters and stuff. We probably won't have any real difficult conversations until we start getting into like defensive linemen 7 through 10. Cornerbacks, do we want to keep 5 versus 6, different things like that. Jamien Sherwood. So Jamien Sherwood, it hasn't been much of a competition. His biggest threat would have been Chaz Surratt. I feel like based on what we saw in that first preseason game. Then Chaz got hurt. Ever since then, the only other real challenger is Zaire Barnes, and I feel like we've seen Jamien Sherwood be able to fend him off pretty well. And with that said, it leaves you comfortable wanting to keep Zaire Barnes in that 4th slot. So Jamien Sherwood comes in as the 3rd starting linebacker for us. On the strong side, and it helps that he bulked himself up this offseason too. I didn't realize it until I went back and checked out some things from earlier, but want to say he put on something like 20, 25 pounds. So he beat out Michael Clemens in terms of what he was able to do to transform his body this year. That helped out a bit. He's definitely shedding his tackles and stuff a lot better. So I think that was one of the biggest concerns. He gets washed out in the running game pretty easily, and he's actually been able to make a decent impact this year with what we've seen. Laken Tomlinson. Okay, so obviously he's a starting guard for us. To be fair, I would probably mix things up and make Joe Tippmann my starting left guard. I don't think that'll actually end up happening. So I'm still going to keep Laken in as our starting left guard here. But if he ends up playing anything close to what we've seen like from last year, and keep in mind, it's not like he's had so strong of a preseason that he's not in danger of potentially losing his spot if we can find an alternative. Joe Tippmann happens to be an excellent pulling guard, or at least he shows a pretty strong ability to go out there and pull amongst some other things. So I don't know. Right now, Lakin Thompson scares me on this offensive line. He can definitely still end up tanking our season mighty quick. So I don't know. Right now, he's looking like another terrible signing for Joe Douglas out of free agency. This is one of those ones where everybody should be confused because it's not like anybody else would have necessarily. I read maybe 2 articles with people that were saying he shouldn't be like a highly sought after free agent. Everybody else was on board. The tape supports it as well. So, I mean, for what it's worth, it's not like we just shot for the stars here. Did it freeze up on me or are we not spinning? Who do we have next? AVT. Okay. Obviously, our starting right guard, without question. I don't know how much of an argument to say it is that he's our undisputed best offensive lineman, purely from a talent standpoint. I feel like the edge still goes to Becton just because he's a freak of nature. But, I mean, we know what AVT can do at multiple positions. So, either way, pretty easy spot to slide him into here. AVT is going to be our right guard. We've had plenty of questions, though, about tackle. So Makai Becton has finally worked out for this team. Otherwise, I know Robert Sala scratching his head tonight. He's got to be awake, stressing out about how he's going to keep Aaron Rodgers from not running for his life the majority of his career. Okay, first interesting one. So Zach Kuntz, our rookie tight end, final pick from the 2023 NFL draft class. I put out a video on this super early in the offseason that I thought he was going to get cut. It still looks like this. I haven't seen anybody who's actually fought to still say that we need to keep Zach Kuntz on there outside of the argument that, hey, he has a perfect RAS score. We need to try to develop the guy. I'm not saying that that's not the argument here, but he can't do it on this team. The man's a liability in almost every aspect. He's blocked a little bit better than I expected because he hasn't shown it really whatsoever in college. But Zach Kuntz would be my first cut of this season. And because of our practice squad rule we mentioned, where we have that protection to block 4 players from being picked up by a different team each week, I am going to put Zach Kuntz as the first player right now on our actual practice squad so we can still get him to sit, develop, and then we can see what happens with him next year. But an older rookie who doesn't really have an ace up his sleeve or a go-to ability that will make him useful on this roster, it's just not going to cut it this year. So one of the hidden benefits will be with him sticking on the practice squad. We won't have to. It'll be a little bit better, I feel like, because he'll still get all of the game planning, but he's also going to have to replicate whatever the opposing team's tight ends are capable of doing. So he'll be able to go out there and work on a number of different skill sets. But he needs work everywhere. He doesn't pass block well. He doesn't run block well, or at least consistently anyways. He's not a strong catcher, doesn't always high point the ball, can't catch in traffic like a beast. He has the speed, he has the agility, he can hop over anybody. That's really what we're looking at right now. So those are traits we want to develop up. At least we've seen flashes of it this preseason. Mainly, I want to say it was the Browns or the Panthers game. Outside of that, though, it's tough to say there's even been a flicker of hope with him turning in anything, at least year one. Our next interesting player here, Justin Hardy. So I don't even remember how many cornerbacks we fully have right now. Let me think. So we have 8, including Justin Hardy. Justin Hardy's only real ability is that he's a strong special teams player, right? A Pro Bowler, could be considered an All Pro caliber guy, but there are a couple things working against him. The first thing is the new NFL rules where what's the word I'm looking for? Basically, you can do a kneel down during kickoffs, etc., up to like a certain point. And they spot you at the 25-yard line, I think. So that's going to already limit a lot of the attempts that Justin Hardy is going to have to go out there and impact, field position. And then two, he's played, I want to say it's one or two defensive snaps for us as a whole. The man is not a cornerback. He is an athletic person that is crazy enough to go out there and want to sacrifice his body for a handful of plays each game, right? And that's not to knock him or anything, but does the value mean so much this year that you can sacrifice keeping a position open for him where he doesn't contribute really anywhere else? And you do have guys like Zach Kuntz, for example, or if you want to keep 10 offensive linemen instead of 9, do you do that? I would say that we've improved our special teams ability overall. I am probably going to have to say we're going to cut Justin Hardy here. Let me see what his cap ramifications actually look like, because we might not be able to necessarily do it based off of that, but let's see. Either way, though, I'm pretty sure he's going to be a gunner. I mean, he's 29 already as well. Let's see. So we have his contract here. Okay, so he got a 3-year, $6.75 million contract with us. We guaranteed him $1 million. Laggy. Okay, so if we wanted to cut him, so we'll save $2.35 million by cutting him. We're not going to get any dead cap money at all. That's all I needed to see. Justin Hardy's a goner. That's additional money in the war chest. We have approximately 19 million or so right now. So that'll put us around 21-22 million dollars. I'm all for it. So Justin Hardy's a goner, and I don't think based on the rules we can place him on the practice squad. Any number of players who have not accrued at least 9 games in the NFL season. Okay, so maybe we could. He would count as one of the 6 players with no limitations on experience. I mean, for what it's worth, fine. We'll put him on the practice squad. If we suffer a special teams injury, then we already have a very capable guy that we'd be excited with. Cool. All right. Man's as good as gone for me. So I'll put him on the practice squad for now. If we end up finding out something that he's not actually eligible, cool. Mekhi Becton, sweet. Okay, so pretty easy conversation once again. He just got confirmed as the starting right tackle by Robert Saleh after the game ended versus the Giants. So obviously the team feels really good. I think they just really needed to see that he was going to be durable enough to get through the game. I'm not even sure how many snaps he necessarily played. But he did so well during practices. He performed very well against the Buccaneers. This was just that last kind of stepping stone in the process, which, for as much as I thought we were going to actually have some version of a tackle competition, that seems to get skipped every year. And it's been due to injury, whether it's Mekhi Becton or whether it's somebody that they brought in to compete with him. And so it's very frustrating that we haven't actually seen what a Mekhi Becton versus Dwayne Brown battle would look like. And it makes me think maybe the coaching staff is a little concerned as well, because if they win, cool. Mekhi Becton doesn't necessarily seem like a completely failed pick. But then you have Dwayne Brown, who's going to be playing out of position. And then you have a vet that could probably end up playing like trash, during the final years of his career. So I feel like from more of an optic standpoint than anything, we're seeing some, political play here. But one of the easiest projections, I mean, we knew this was coming. If they did move him to right tackle and he didn't make a fuss about it, the expectation was that he's the best tackle on our team. And the only close argument there would be whether Dwayne Brown is a piece of that. So wide receiver Jerome Cap, our undrafted free agent. This is the guy that's out of Kutztown. He did very well during mini camps, and then he's been almost invisible ever since. And this isn't new news for us. We're accustomed to a lot of these guys flashing during mini camps, and then once we actually put the pads on, press coverage is out there, full 11 on 11s, we see guys starting to disappear. But for what's his worth, Jerome Cap did have some pretty interesting strong points to him. One of the fastest get-offs for all of our wide receiver cores, period. That's including Garrett Wilson. Keep in mind, I said one of the fastest. So his release game is pretty crazy, and he seems to do very well in the short field. He's been able to catch a couple deep passes, but ultimately, I think it's pretty easy to say that Jerome Cap's been lapped up by a couple of the other undrafted free agent receivers. So this is another guy that we are going to stash on our practice squad. And then we'll see who we want to try to end up protecting ultimately, so that we don't just lose out on a very talented guy. But we have some interesting options that are going to be out there. So for potentially a 5th and a 6th receiver spot that's open, Jerome Cap doesn't seem like he's going to be much of a competitive player for either one of those positions to me. Jordan Whitehead. All right, so safety situation's been interesting. They've changed some things up, right? We've seen our starters, Tony Adams and Jordan Whitehead. We've seen them each play each other's role, free safety and strong safety. We've seen what do we call it? We've seen a combo package where we've rolled out 3 safeties, and we've seen that roll into the preseason where you might have, an Ashton Davis, Trey Dean, and maybe like a Marquise Waters rolling around. But all in all, Jordan Whitehead, he hasn't looked like one of the best players on the team, but he's far improved from what we've seen from last year. He's actually made a ton of plays on the balls. Interceptions, he's been able to cause some fumbles. He doesn't look like he's out of position all the time and just catching up the plays. We're seeing a lot of those highlight plays that we saw when we originally signed him, where he's playing closer to the line of scrimmage. He's diagnosing plays. He's keeping things to a minimal in terms of, what the opponents can gain. So confident seeing him still as our starting strong safety. And I think Tony Adams is going to actually complement him very well in terms of allowing him to stay doing what he does best. Cool. So we've had some interesting names pop up so far. Still a couple of starters coming in at random here, by the way, again. But yeah, I think the only real shocker maybe so far would be me putting Zach Kuntz, cutting him, putting him on the practice squad, and then of course Justin Hardy. But to save almost $2.5 million for, again, a guy that's not going to see a ton of playing time. And I'm, aside from special teams, it's smart to me. Defensive tackle Tanzel Smart. So he's shined in almost every preseason game that we've seen him in over the last couple years. He's a guy that a lot of us felt like should have made the roster, a year ago, even ahead of guys like Solomon Thomas that we went out and signed. Defensive tackle also happens to be one of our thinnest spots. So if he was going to make the roster, this would definitely be the year to get it done. The question is that we have a couple of different guys that have been playing well as soon as they jumped in, right? We've seen Bruce Hector go out and play reasonably well, racking up a couple of sacks. Jalen Holmes came in immediately with that 2-sack game. He's been around the ball in terms of being a decent run stopper pretty well. Would you give the advantage to the homegrown kid who's stuck it out with the New York Jets for a couple of years now over what we're seeing from guys like Jalen Holmes and Bruce Hector, which are, the regular NFL vets? I think it depends on how many guys we actually try to keep, because right now, I believe we technically have more defensive ends than defensive tackles, right? Jalen Holmes is more of a defensive end. Bruce Hector is definitely a defensive tackle. I would probably say this is the year that we would see Tanzel Smart make the roster. Frank Schultz. So Elijah Vera Tucker was the 2021 draft class. I'm pretty positive. I think is he? Yeah. Because Zach Wilson was the 2020, and I don't think we picked him up in the same draft class. I will say Tanzel Smart makes our roster as our third defensive tackle. And I kind of got a list going in the background, so I'll probably post that once we're kind of wrapping up these conversations. I think I'm going to give it to him. Tanzel Smart, our third defensive tackle. He's justified being able to get himself a position. Love the way he gets off his blocks. We see him in the backfield consistently. He looks like another version of, I don't want to say Quentin Williams, but in terms of being capable against both the pass and the rush and not leaning strictly towards one or the other, he's definitely going to be one of our better depth players in that area. So for what it's worth, for you guys, just so you kind of know the general thought process that I have here in terms of roster construction, I have 10 defensive linemen, potentially 11 that I'm looking at signing. So we have one of those 10 potential guys right now with Tanzel Smart coming. So I think he makes the roster this year. I can't imagine seeing him go back to the practice squad once again, because if we're not going to protect him, I think this is a season where you see him get snatched up. If people know my guy, I was a huge fan of why am I forgetting his name right now? I might have finally accepted. I can't remember his name anymore. Either way, we drafted a defensive tackle that also had a perfect 10 RAS score, and the Steelers scooped him up. He didn't show as much as what Tanzel Smart did, and he got grabbed pretty quickly. So, the end, Will McDonald. Okay, so one of our first primary edge rushers here, right? The way that I'm going to look at this right now is that with Carl Lawson still dealing with his back injury, which seems serious enough because we haven't seen him in basically 3 weeks, your edge starters right now is probably Jonathan Franklin Myers and then Jermaine Johnson. So I will say Will McDonald is that clear next guy after JFM, and probably the guy once you reduce JFM into the interior. So I'm going to say Will McDonald is our DE2 on the left side, backing up JFM. And it's preseason, but he's at least proven that the lights aren't too bright for him so far, especially compared to what we saw out of a guy like Jermaine Johnson last year, where, you know, you can argue who's the more athletic guy. But still, it's been nice to see that Will McDonald's come out very strong, especially considering nobody really knew a ton about him, right? He looked like a late day one guy. Breece Hall, easiest conversation out here. He's going to be our running back 1. I'm not even considering this like a 1A, 1B type situation. Running back 1 is Breece Hall. He's looked very good in the training camp practices that we've seen so far. Obviously, nobody's really tackling him, but we're seeing the explosion. We're seeing the speed. We're seeing him still be able to cut, plant his foot, and be able to get out of some jams extremely quick. I think that'll translate. He's still looking at basically, 2.5 weeks or so before week 1 to kind of continue to get, the training wheels up off of him and really feel like he's back to old things. But again, it's the magic for having Dalvin Cook, regardless of if he's ready to go out there and play 20 snaps or not. Right out of the gate, Dalvin Cook can really minimize a lot of the load early on for him. The running back room as a whole, though, is actually a lot better than I think a lot of people are giving it credit for. If anything, the offensive line is really going to throw a lot of salt on any of the good things that could positively go on for us this year. What are we looking at now? Okay, so we have Bryce Huff. Okay. Bryce Huff, very similar situation to Will McDonald in my eyes. The only issue is, do we end up seeing another situation where the New York Jets are kind of scared to play him because he's not great against the run whatsoever? Technically, from like an all-around game standpoint, I would say even our undrafted free agent Deslin Alexander has him beat in terms of just overall what he can do to contribute to the team. Pure pass rushing specialist, though, top-notch guy on our squad. So I would probably say that a guy like Bryce Huff is going to be our third string edge rusher. Yeah, I think he finds himself in a similar situation to what he did last year. He's probably playing around 200 snaps. Probably won't be trusted a ton to go out there and contribute in the run game, at least in some of those obvious situations, or even situations where it's probably like a 50-50. So I'll say he's edge rusher 3 behind Will McDonald. Yeah, I can't see him beating out even like a Carl Lawson if he comes back and he's ready to go. Tackle Greg Sinnett. Okay, so very little that I know about this guy. The only reason his name sticks out to me is because I remember him and Grant Hermans being 2 of the main contributors to like a lot of the offseason fights last year. This year, things have been a lot more relaxed, but they were definitely heavy agitators. But outside of that, Greg Sinnett seems like he's a coaching staff favorite for some reason. That was obviously before Keith Carter got here. But I don't really see him sticking around. Maybe he's a practice squad guy, but for a guy who's been within the team essentially for a good couple years, and he hasn't really elevated or done anything more than being like a 4th, 5th, 6th guy on the depth chart, I don't think he's worth keeping around. So Gregson, that will be my first official cut. We're not looking to really keep him on any further. Thought this was going to be a lot harder than what it is, at least so far. We haven't really gotten into some of the other names. Cornerback Sauce Gardner. All right. Again, one of the easiest conversations we're going to come across. He's obviously cornerback 1 on our roster. Only interesting piece is how we still plan to utilize him. Can he move around a little bit more this year? I doubt it. Seems like the coaching staff really trusts DJ Reed playing on the right side and locking things down where he's obviously much more comfortable. I would like to see him move around if possible, though, but we all know what his talent is. Okay, so our next interesting name, Jason Brownlee. This one's tough to me because we've seen him look elite during training camps. He's mossing people. He's attacking all areas of the field. He's high-pointing catches. We get to the preseason, and we're not seeing all of those same elements per se. Then again, when you also take a look at some of the players that were guarding him, he's mossing guys like Craig James, out jumping Ashton Davis, different things like that. So it's not like he's beating out, Sauce Gardner consistently or anything like that. Although he did, maybe it was broken coverage again, but he was able to beat Sauce Gardner on one play as well as a safety at the time. I do like his talent. I think if we don't get him on this team, he's going to have to be a protected practice squad player, or he's 100% getting snatched up, especially after the joint practices. So is he better suited to take our 5th or 6th wide receiver spot than, say, a guy like Xavier Gipson, who also had a very good game against the Giants, and I think will turn into a very good returner for us? The 3 guys on the back end in the wide receiver room that I'm realistically looking at, or at least the 4, I should say, Alec Erickson, the vet, and then you have the undrafted free agents. You have Jason Brownlee, Irvin Charles, Xavier Gipson. If Xavier Gipson gets one because of his special teams ability, then that leaves Erickson, Irvin Charles, and Jason Brownlee up for debate. Irvin Charles has maybe been more consistent in making sure he's catching all of the opportunities that were thrown his way. He hasn't necessarily flashed really outside of minicamp. Jason Brownlee's had the high. He's had the high moments and a lot of the highlights during training camp that hasn't necessarily translated to the games. I would probably say we have a better chance of sneaking Irvin Charles onto the practice squad for one more year than Jason Brownlee. GVH was good, boss. Good post early on. Just saw you on. Did you discuss linebackers safety room yet? A little bit. So basically what I'm running through here, we have a randomizer. I have all the names that's on the roster right now. We're going at random, and I'm trying to build out our 53-man roster this way instead of just going through all of the, position by position groups to try to keep it interesting. So I'll kind of recap what we have after we get through a few more names probably. I think I'm going to make Jason Brownlee our wide man. What do I have? I have us keeping 6 wide receivers. So I will make Jason Brownlee wide receiver 6 for us. Whether he gets called up on game days or whatever, another question. But at least you have a guy that you feel really confident in on the back end there in case somebody like Alan Lazard does go down. You have another guy with similar frame, skill set, et cetera, et cetera. Brownlee looked like he played his way on the practice squad. Not good. Not bad. And I see what you're doing here. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's a little bit disappointing. I was really hoping we saw what he was doing in training camp translate over to the preseason games. I want to say he got a lot of his work against the second string guys with when we played him. But I also do take a look at some of the situations, like when we were playing the Browns, he was the focal point in like the second half for guys that we wanted to for guys we were looking to help get us into the end zone. He just wasn't coming down with a lot of opportunities. So still, I'm going to keep him wide receiver 6. We're going to let him develop, and I think he can contribute this season. I think Alan Lazard definitely goes down at some point. So Trey Dean the third, if I remember correctly. So Trey Dean the third, I've already kind of chatted about him. In my eyes, I think he is at least on par with Ashton Davis. You could argue that he's been more consistent during the preseason than what we've seen out of Ashton Davis. And so with what he brings from his size standpoint, his speed, his ability to match up with basically anybody, I will say that he finally finds a way to replace Ashton Davis here. We'll get a significant amount of change back as well. And I do have us keeping 4 safety, so he would be the backup to Jordan Whitehead in this case, which is not bad. Undrafted free agent, a guy that still pretty much has a clear role on the back end for us. And you can still try to get him developed in that free safety spot kind of as the season goes when we do roll out those combo, 3 safety packages as well. It's a lot of opportunity for him, but I do like what he showed so far. He did have a pretty quiet game against the Giants, though, but I don't know what his snap count looks like. I think he only finished with like 2 or 3 tackles. He's generally been around the ball pretty frequently outside of that, though. Okay, Jermaine Johnson. So I would imagine this isn't much of a shocker to anybody, but with what Carl Lawson's back has been looking like, and I also made the point before that it seemed like Jermaine Johnson was stealing first-team snaps from Carl Lawson even before the back injury occurred. He would be my starting edge rusher. We have nobody. Okay, so we have Will McDonald as the 2, Bryce Huff as the 3 on the left side. Jermaine Johnson would end up being the starting edge rusher on the right side for us. It's nice to see how impressive he's actually been this offseason, though, after being pretty quiet as far as first-round picks go last year. All right, so another easy one, Dalvin Cook. He's going to be our running back, too. I would imagine early on that he takes more of the receiving abilities. I think he takes more of the receiving abilities, and he probably has like a 60-40 split in terms of carries with Breece Hall, at least until we start seeing significant progress from him in a real game. Breece Hall will probably, of course, obviously take 40% of the carries. I'm sure he'll still be incorporated into the receiving game a little bit, but I see him probably being the primary pass blocker since Dalvin Cook's pretty bad in that area early on. And then we'll kind of see how they want to throw in maybe like Michael Carter in the mix and, whoever else ends up making the running back room. But okay. Chris Glazer, another one of those bottom tier offensive lineman guys for us. I know very little about Chris Glazer. The one thing I do know, he's not making this roster. So we're going to go ahead and throw him into the cut category. No idea if they plan on bringing him back or not, but yeah, he's a name I know for sure has been popping up here and there for us. Got to remember, JJ was a first-round pick, so I agree with it. He's got to start and rotate Williams, Woods, and Jefferson. Thomas on the inside. Yeah, for sure. I loved his work ethic. I didn't love his skill set whatsoever coming out, but Jermaine Johnson just seemed like he had one of those blue-collar, I'll get the job done by any means type mentality. I will always fight for one of those guys on the roster, but I would have even if he pans out, he's a guy I would have hated us to pick at number 10, especially considering who we ultimately got. But yeah, I didn't see the hype for him being like a top 10 guy. Okay, defensive tackle Al Woods. So we have our first starting interior player here. He is going to essentially be our true nose tackle. And we discussed this a little bit during the Jets Fly Squad podcast as well. I do think he'll end up on the starting line just because it'll give them a little bit of a different look. Having his run presence and a team generally having to commit 2 guys to him is going to help out, especially with Quentin Williams getting him those one-on-one matchups. It'll allow us to run stunts a little bit more if we want to try to do that. There's a number of different benefits that we'll get from having him out there. So JJ is a straight beast. Yeah, for sure. I did love his college tape for what it's worth. But yeah, when I looked at him compared to, the other guys that were coming out, even some of the guys that came out behind him, and I don't remember his name, but I want to say like Boye Mafe is one. I think I'm way off on that. But there's a couple other rookies where at least you've seen with them that there was a surefire move that they had, or you could see them kind of setting things up so that they can get a rip move to work or a spin move or being able to attack the edge. And with Jermaine Johnson, he was just going to kind of out hustle you to get to the quarterback. Brownlee's going to hold on. Brownlee going to squeak in there. Yeah, so I have Brownlee as our wide receiver 6 right now. And I do have us keeping 6 wide receivers at the moment. Okay, John Franklin Myers. So we have our starting pair of edge rushers now. So JFM on the left side, Will McDonald as our second string, Bryce Huff as our third, and then we have Jermaine Johnson as our right starting edge rusher. Yeah, man, I hope Jason Brownlee can become something. He reminds me of like a Jermaine Johnson on the offensive side for what it's worth. I want to say I've seen I think they showed it to us on one of the Flight Series documentaries, but like him constantly being on the jugs machine, he's staying late, he's putting in the work. So I can't be more excited for him. I will say it's still a little sad that, the success in training camp didn't translate to the games, but undrafted free agent for a reason. And I think he's shown out more than what you'd expect from a guy who fell so far. Free safety, Tony Adams. So this is my guy. This is an obvious starter for us at free safety. I am so happy that he has panned out early and often for this New York Jets team. I didn't know really what to expect from him, but based on what we're seeing out of training camp, he looks like he may be able to go and get himself maybe 6 interceptions this season. Seeing the work he's done with mitigating Aaron Rodgers attacking the deep field has been thoroughly oppressive, but just seeing him work all over and make plays no matter what. This is a huge steal for Robert Saleh and his coaching staff. I love a good underdog story, and Tony Adams, he's right on the money. Marquise Waters, our other undrafted free agent. Okay, so 2 different skill sets, right? Trading the third to me was an obvious strong safety. Marquise Waters kind of had the versatility to play both positions. I know he made some changes in college based on him wanting to play more of a free safety role. Unfortunately, he hasn't necessarily really flashed or done anything impressive. Still a lot of fundamental work he needs to do in terms of being able to break down tackles in the open field. Hasn't made really any plays on the ball whatsoever the entire offseason. But he is a guy that I still am interested in. So I would say this is going to be a practice squad candidate for us. Losing CD is addition. I don't know. Corey Davis, I thought was going to have a very good season. Him retiring was trash. It does help us try to squeeze on one of these younger guys. But having Corey Davis was kind of that buffer that made you very secure. And, if an injury or two crept up, and it wasn't for Garrett Wilson and it wasn't going to be for Corey Davis, you felt good about still being able to weather the storm. Allen Lazard, not the same talent at the wide receiver 2 spot to me. So if you get nicked up with a guy like Randall Cobb or even Mecole Hardman or somebody like that, I see us struggling. Derek Langford, this is a pretty easy conversation for me. He's going to be a cut candidate. The cornerback room was always going to be one of the hardest ones to break into. But what I will say is he hasn't made any turnover-worthy plays, but he has been able to go out there and get some pretty good pass deflections. Keep in mind, this was a guy that had Sauce Gardner-type metrics, right? 6'3", kind of a long, lanky frame, but he has very agile hips, so he can go out there and do some things that cornerbacks generally shouldn't be able to do in terms of mirroring his opponent. But he's going to need a lot of seasoning. So hopefully he stays. He's not a guy I would want to protect per se, but he could be an interesting year 2 replacement for a guy like Bryce Hall. Brownlee's lack of preseason production is giving Mims projection vibes. Think I'd rather have Malik Taylor. No, I think it's different. Brownlee was still making plays. His hands didn't look as strong as they did in practice, in my opinion. I think he still showed more than what Mims has. If I was going to pick one of the veterans, though, I would say Alex Erickson has them beat. I'm not too big of a fan of Malik Taylor per se. I know he had a couple of big plays, but Davis never had an Aaron Rodgers, though. I hear you, the injuries were bad, but with Tannehill, he did well. Yeah, that's usually been one of my biggest arguments when people talk to me about Corey Davis. When Ryan Tannehill was in the middle of that MVP-like season, Corey Davis looked borderline unstoppable. I know he still didn't crack 1,000 yards, but even on the plays where he wasn't targeted, he was crushing his man across the line of scrimmage. So, yeah, I don't know. He's always been a very underrated wide receiver, in my opinion. Quarterback circumstances and stuff just never really helped him, and, he couldn't overcome a lot of the injuries that he tended to deal with quite a bit. Linebacker. I think this is going to be one of the easiest conversations for the position as a whole. Obviously, we have our top 3 guys, right? We've only gotten a Jamie and Sherwood from the randomizer so far. But I think when you take a look at what we've seen between training camp and the preseason games, Zaire Barnes is that 4th guy. If we were to keep 5, I would probably say I would defer to somebody like Nick Vigil, the veteran that we had picked up a couple weeks ago. And we would keep these other linebacker guys on the back end, and hopefully, we can develop them in the behind the scenes. A lot of them fit the mold, of course, that we love. Smaller, extremely fast. Some of these guys hit like missiles. But my guy, anyways, was Malik Hall. We ended up cutting him with the injury. So Claudin Chairless is going to go to the practice squad for me. Like CD, like Corey Davis blocking potential. That's done. Yeah. Really weird. I hope we kind of find out what was behind like the retirement per se. He's had that personal matters like, declaration behind him for almost like a full month. So I don't know. Whole thing was just really weird. Hopefully everything was cool with the family and stuff, but I hate when players go out that way and everything's just kind of like a looming mystery. Aaron Rodgers is going to be the play action dump off king this year for sure. He'll definitely be using a lot of play action. I won't say it'll necessarily need to be dump offs though. What we saw in training camp is that he was still hitting guys between like 5 and 15 yards, and then they were still breaking off an additional, 5 to 15. The Jets are going to hit a lot of home runs this year with our running backs in the pass and the run. Yeah, no doubt. Our offensive line, even though they haven't all played together and stuff, I think overall is definitely much improved. And we've seen Breece Hall do a lot of his damage by himself. People forget for a lot of those major runs that he had last year, he broke through like 3, 4, 5 tackles. He didn't really have any bodies up front to help him out. Brent Lang, another one of those, seasonal offensive linemen that we pick up that's really just a camp body. If we bring him back, I'm assuming it's going to be after we've completely violated the waiver wire pickup claim options and all of that kind of stuff. Brent Lang, he's going to be another outright cut for me. If we keep them around, though, I'll say maybe we need to pay a little bit more attention to them, only because we've changed our offensive coaching staff. So if Keith Carter is willing to keep him around, I will say that's probably worth mentioning. Never heard of Brent Lang. You're digging deep. I do my research. There's some of the bottom tier name guys. They tend to stick to me for quite a while. Carter Warren. Okay. Carter Warren, we know very minimal about outside of, the scouting breakdown. He hasn't been healthy to really do much. He's participated in a handful of practices, and depending on which scouting review you trust in, some people love what he can do as a pass blocker. Some people think he's a complete train wreck as a tackle, NFL tackle prospect anyways. When it comes to being a starter, he's a guy that we're going to try to sneak on to the practice squad, and he'll probably get the protection designation. But for what it's worth, I'm not stashing a guy on my roster that has barely been able to stay on the field for a week. That would be like us just completely handing over the keys to Mike Becton without us having seen him in the preseason whatsoever. Travis Dye. All right. So our undrafted free agent running back. To be honest, I'm actually pretty impressed with him. I thought his leg injury was more severe than what it was. But he's been in a pretty good amount of practices. He's been more of a problem in the receiving game than I think as a pure rusher. And so I think he has a role, right? I think he could be a direct Ty Johnson replacement. But for what we have going for running backs deep, Breece Hall, Dalvin Cook, Michael Carter, I would probably say the rookie Izzy gets probably gets the nod over a guy like Travis Dye, but he makes the practice squad for me, for sure. Let him sit for a year, and then he can actually take over that Ty Johnson third down back role. Carter Warren, he's got to go to IR, right? Save the space and have him compete with Mitchell next year. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like they would have put him on IR already. Definitely could be a candidate, but I don't know. I don't know how that'll work for him. I think if anything, he's just having, maybe it's the Mekhi Becton effect, right? He's still getting like swelling and stuff that's coming up that's stopping him, because he's not like Jarek Bernard Converse, for example, who, he's been in that boot and he's never practiced the entire, off season minus that 1 or 2 practices. So I don't know. I would be good with either option. Brandon Echols. Okay, Brandon Echols is cornerback 4 for me. I am going to say that he beats out Bryce Hall by a pretty comfortable margin. And then, of course, that Giants game helped really seal things in terms of recency bias for people. But he did well as a starter, right? He has the reaction ability. He has the speed. He mirrors opponents pretty well. He could definitely still use a lot of work. But having him come off the bench and being able to take on, somebody's second, third, fourth string wide receiver is a huge help. Do you value preseason performance over training camp? And if the former, why are people valuing Jason Brownlee over Irvin Charles? I would probably say I put more stock into training camp than the preseason games, but it's all relative. So, for example, if Jason Brownlee is generally working in our third string unit, and so he's seeing guys like Bryce Hall, Craig James, who else? Jimmy Moreland. And then you go out there and he's playing, the Buccaneers, the Browns, the Giants' second string cornerbacks, and you're seeing him do well or do poorly. I would probably say that's more telling than anything else. But yeah, personally, I still think Irvin Charles probably hasn't beat just because he's been a little bit more consistent. But the rationale that I had, for example, was that Jason Brownlee, he's probably going to get picked up by another team. I think he still has something special to him based on what I've seen in training camp. Irvin Charles is a guy that you're probably more likely to sneak onto the practice squad and be able to call him up as you need to. So I think it's a little bit of, how do they say it? Having your ice cream and trying to eat it too, or however the saying goes. But yeah, I definitely feel you. Irvin Charles to me has had the better camp overall, again, in terms of consistency. But Jason Brownlee's had a lot more of the consistent highlights in terms of him dominating some of our defensive backs. So that's probably the most likely reason. Nick Vigil. So we already chatted about him a bit. If we're going 5 linebackers deep, Nick Vigil is going to be my choice of, a former linebacker that's called plays for the defense. I want to say back in Cincinnati. We've seen him come in and look very capable, of course, playing talent much further below than what he's generally used to. And I think he'd be a good veteran voice within that locker room once again. So I'm not sure where I have one roster spot that I didn't account for. I left it up in the air. So I could have, and this is basically because I don't plan on having a fullback. I could have 10 offensive linemen instead of 9. I could have 11 defensive linemen instead of 10. I could have 5 linebackers instead of 4. I could try to keep a 5th tight end if I wanted to try to save Zach Kuntz instead of 4. There's a lot of different ways to go with it, but I don't want to play this. Nick Vigil is definitely a guy I think I'd like to have on the roster, but it may be worth cutting him so that I can still keep that extra defensive lineman. I think that's what I'll do. I think we'll stick with 4 linebackers. We'll have enough guys on the practice squad that I think we would feel comfortable enough with moving up if injuries hit. And considering we run a lot of 4-2-5 defenses anyways, where we only have Quincy and CJ out on the field, should help mitigate a lot of that. So yeah, let's say that we'll cut Nick Vigil. I won't even say that we'll keep him on the practice squad. We'll just outright cut him. And we still have the other guy, Sam, Iguavin. We still have like Claude and Cherylus, who we already put on the practice squad. So yeah, I'm all right. I'm okay when it comes to this. We should be running into a lot more starters pretty soon. Okay, Bruce Hector. So Bruce Hector came in a couple of weeks ago. He's already made splash plays in terms of joint practices and then what we've seen in the NFL games as well. I did put Tanzel Smart ahead of him. And I'm trying to think. So let's see. We have probably 14, 15 guys on the D line as a whole. I don't know if we keep. Let me see. Q, Woods, Thomas, Jefferson. I already have Smart. I don't know if we keep 5 or 6 guys at defensive tackle. I think I'm okay cutting Bruce Hector. I think Tanzel Smart would be our bottom tier guy at the DT spot. Not sure if Bruce Hector clears waivers or any of that stuff, but I would say he would probably be a pretty good practice squad guy for us. All right, we'll cut him, make him practice squad. I think everybody ahead of Tanzel Smart seems pretty obvious for us. Okay. Pita. Okay, so for those that don't know, this was the XFL Defensive MVP of the Year, or excuse me, Defensive Player of the Year. I think he had a sack against the Giants. He's done pretty good as an edge rushing prospect, obviously, Defensive Player of the Year. Does he make this roster? Absolutely not, but I am 100% stashing him on the practice squad. So right now we have what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have 10 guys on the practice squad. That gives us 6 remaining pieces. We also have to keep in mind a lot of those names will probably shift pretty quickly once we figure out who we are in or out of in the waiver wire pickups. CJ Mosley. Okay, CJ Mosley, starting linebacker 1. That is pretty straightforward for us. Our fearless leader in the middle of our defense. Peter's my guy. I just don't know where to put him. Yeah, he's interesting. He's definitely somewhat of a tweener. So you feel like he could probably play linebacker as like a bit of an edge rusher. Not quite an edge guy, though. And we don't really play our linebackers in a role where they're blitzing a ton as a pass rusher, or Zaire Barnes will look like a much better steal for us. So who knows? Hopefully he can make the adjustment because I'm pretty sure we're going to try to use him as a linebacker. But yeah, we'll see ultimately how he pans out. CJ the Commander Mosley, 100%. I hope he pulls out the Bane mask again this Halloween. It's still an image that's like burned into my brain. That was pretty dope. Hey, buddy. I see. You sleep good? Yeah.
What you guys going on?
Dad's running through some football stuff.
Okay.
All right, who do we got next? Tristan Colon. So I don't know what to do about him because I think in some aspects he's a better offensive line guy than Wes Schweitzer is. But Wes Schweitzer obviously is a lot more versatile, can play 3 spots, was the main competitor in the center competition, probably more physical than a guy like Tristan Colon is. So I would probably say right now we have to give that spot to Wes Schweitzer. Do we have room for Colon?
You don't.
If we keep 9 people? No room?
No.
I can't remember all of the names. Hold on. So on the back end, so it's like Tristan Colon versus guys like Brent Lang, Chris Glazer, Adam Pinky that we cut. Yeah, I would probably say right now Tristan Colon doesn't make the roster. He's going to be a cut for me.
Me?
He can be a cut for you?
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Thank you.
I thought... Nah, boycott. I'm a little bit older than that, but appreciate you. Yes, this is little DKB. Say I'm a Jets fan.
I'm a Jets fan.
You know it. All right, Tristan Colon's not going to make it for us. We don't have... Okay, so the only offensive lineman on our practice squad right now is Carter Warren. I don't think Tristan Colon would actually end up on the practice squad, so I'm going to say he's just going to be an outright cut. Why are you breathing like that? You thirsty?
No, I'm just gonna. I'll start young gun. I'm doing a deep breath because I got a young gun on.
Go drink some of your juice. Go use the bathroom. If Schweitzer's making it, Colon isn't. Yeah, it's not all gone. You got a little bit in there.
Yeah, but it's not going to come out.
It will.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's probably the thought process there. Smart kid. You have no idea. He's not all that into football, but obviously I try to sneak in games and stuff when he's around when I can. He'll be just fine. He's coming into the golden ages. I doubt he'll have to suffer like we did. So he has a leg up.
Daddy?
What's up, bud?
There is pee in here.
Okay. Just leave it on the floor, Daddy. You'll clean it up when I'm done.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll go to the bathroom next time.
Thank you. Dwayne Brown. Okay, so obviously he's looking like our starting left tackle. Cool. I don't think there needs to be any real conversation around Dwayne Brown. The only thing for me is that I'm hoping he can stay durable he doesn't really seem like he's having any leg issues, and I don't think the shoulders will be too much of a problem. He just seems like he needs to work back into football shape. Grant Hermans. Okay, lightly talked about him as well. A lot of training camp fights. Very physical guy. Nothing really impressive outside of his physicality, though. So he's definitely not making the roster. And he's definitely not a guy that I expect to really make his rounds back to the Jets. So he's being outright cutted. Xavier Gipson. Okay, so I'm very much so up in the air. We already made Jason Brownlee our wide receiver 6. We know our top 4 guys. We know who they are. The question is, do they love what Xavier Gipson has done in the punt game more so than what Alex Erickson can do as a receiver? Xavier Gipson's best game obviously was versus, the Giants this preseason, had, his most opportunities, capitalized on. I want to say he made 8 catches out of his 10 targets, I think. Made a number of impressive plays during training camp, and obviously he's broke off some pretty big opportunities as a punt returner. Alan Lazard, Randall Cobb, Miko Hartman are technically the veteran guys in the room. I feel like I want Alex Erickson because I know what we're getting out of him. He's also one of the backup punt returner and kick returners as well. But I think you take a risk with the youth on the back end of the roster. Also, this limits you having to expose Miko Hartman to as many additional hits on special teams. Or if he goes down, you have a capable guy. Although, again, Erickson also can be a returner for us. I think we make Gipson our 5th guy. Yeah. We're still kind of like 1 foot in, 1 foot out on this youth movement. I'm going to say Xavier Gipson is our wide receivers 5. Plus he would be, so what? As a wide receiver, he's not really going to do much on the boundary if they try to kick him out there. In the slot, he's going to be our 3rd guy. In the return game, he's either going to be your primary guy for one, either the kick or punt returner, or he's going to be the main backup to one or the other. Yeah, I think that's the move. Gipson got the shiftiness you want. I think he showed out punt and kickoff ability. Yeah, man, it's a tough conversation. I think the biggest shift to keeping him over a guy like Alex Erickson is definitely his return ability. Oh, okay. Tigo, what's good, my boy? I did not see that they cut visual yet. It probably happened while I was streaming. If not, it's probably when I was putting my son down. Okay, then that falls in line with what my thought process earlier was. Sweet. X did enough yesterday, I agree. Though I still want to trade for a wide receiver because Rodgers is only around so long. Wow. So no, there's one guy they cut right before our preseason game, Tigo. A DB. Can't remember his name. I don't think it was Craig Jones or Craig James, but We let some DB go right before the game, and then Vigil is our second guy, I believe. That's tough. Tough. Not unexpected, but tough. Cruikshank, good looking out. That's what it was. Well, he didn't come in and make like the biggest splash, especially considering where he was on the depth chart. It really shouldn't be much of a surprise. Agreed. I mean, the way Salah and JD has gone about trying to handle cuts, anyways, though they've definitely tried to do right by any of the players they let go. They don't really try to drag their feet with any of that stuff. Tyler Conklin. All right. Not really much of a discussion. Same situation. Clear tight end 1. And I think he has that job locked down by a pretty decent margin. His ceiling, again, probably a top 7 wide receiver. Probably a top 7 tight end in the league if everything breaks right for him. Just in terms of yardage, potentially touchdowns. Would make a decent Batman to Rucker Robin if he can get that second spot. I feel like we most likely will pick a wide receiver up from the NFL cuts. Now that Corey's retired, we need someone more reliable wide receiver. Yeah, there's been a lot of I know on Green Bean's Thursday Thickovich show, his most recent one, they had some crazy names potentially out there. They were talking about Chase Claypool being available potentially. I forget some of the other names that they tossed out, but yeah, it was. I'm sure there's going to be some surprising players there, but it's also going to be tough because I think we are the 13th team in the pecking order. So we're not going to get top dibs on a lot of these other guys, ahead of us. So if we get one, it's going to be a sneaky good addition. And it'll probably more likely be competing with like whoever we potentially pick up will probably be competing more with like Mecole Hardman than Alan Lazard. I really think they should trade for a wide receiver. Go get Renfro, Brown, Gallup, whoever's available. The only problem is I'm pretty sure whoever we need to trade for is going to take a second round pick. And so if the player that we're not getting is a guaranteed at least 2-year deal, I don't know how much worth it'll be. We'll already be losing our first round pick. We'll end up losing our second. This is a team that we still want to make sure we can go into the draft. And not that we need top tier guys, but we need at least the ability to go out there and try to still keep a bit of a youth movement going. Vigil had that hit that got Salah hyped. Panthers game, I think. Did you all see any talent worth picking up that got cut recently? If you did, you should be hired as a pro scout. I'm not in the know. I didn't plan on checking that out until like Monday or Tuesday. But yeah, we'll probably do another live stream or something for it. That might have been the topic I actually picked for our Jets Fly Squad podcast Monday, now that I think about it. Anthony Schwartz of the Cleveland Browns is a super interesting cut. Not for us because he's a developmental wide receiver, but in a new system, he has some stuff. Anthony Schwartz. Was that the guy that's built to be like a slot receiver? Agreed to go with wide receiver. Got enough faith in the top 3 cornerbacks. So glad. Yeah, no doubt. To be fair, though, I still think we also need to go and grab us a DB. Not for a trade, but expecting that Bryce Hall is going to get cut, I would still like to make sure we have a decent replacement in the pipeline. Yeah, I remember his name coming up very briefly as a guy people should be paying attention to. I don't know. If I don't necessarily want a slot guy, even if he's the best one available. Not Anthony Schwartz, but just a player in general. It feels like we're heavy on slot guys and not really enough boundary winners at the moment, which I think is why so many people are upset about Corey Davis retiring. Randall Cobb, this one's very easy. Of course, on the heels of Corey Davis' retirement announcement, he is wide receiver 3 for us and our main slot receiver at the moment. He might be more of like a pseudo starter. Now that I'm thinking about it, because he's old. I mean, I'm pretty sure he can make it through a season. I don't think you want to subject his body to that per se, though. So I could easily see him kind of being like I guess that's the best way to put it, a false starter. Mecole Hardman will definitely end up kind of feeding into a lot of what he's doing. Solomon Thomas. So I have very little faith that he's going anywhere. Obviously, I had Tanzel Smart as our third defensive tackle. Not to be confused with technically the nose tackle, where Al Woods is. But I would say Solomon Thomas is probably the second string defensive tackle behind Quentin Jefferson. Flight Squad playing GM, that would be a cool live stream. Yeah, we'll see. I'm pretty sure we'll have a lot of news by Monday, so I'm hoping that ends up being a interesting video for us. We'll see if we have some guys that come through. I know Tico tends to make it. I want to say Dom from Green Beans channel might be able to slide through from what they told me. I don't know. We'll see if we can make a party of it. All right, super easy. Thomas Morstead, he is our main punter. I am very much so happy that we finally have two established. I don't want to say top tier and then kind of overhype them, but two established veterans that are very good at their craft. And we've already seen his leg on display. With being able to help flip the field very quickly for us. So I know Brad Boyer has to at least be celebrating that win. All right, Adrian Amos, clearly going to make the roster. I don't want to say clearly. I don't know if the New York Jets will look into an actual younger replacement for him. A bit more of a natural free safety. His contract isn't unreasonable from what I remember. Let me pull it up and see. I think we get like $1 million and some change in a dead cap hit if we were to cut him. So okay, dead cap hit would be 1.8 million. We'll only save 730,000. Okay, so not an ideal guy to cut, but it won't be the end of the world if we do. But either way, right now came in, couldn't snatch away the free safety job from Tony Adams. Clearly, the second free safety. I do like his versatility to be able to come in, though, and also drop down into the box. And then again, if you want to have him in the combo package as one of those deep field free safeties while you maybe roll out Jordan Whitehead and Trey Dean closer to the line of scrimmage, you feel comfortable with him being able to hold down the fort for, a little bit. Man, we still got quite a few names here. I can only imagine how long Robert Saleh and them are like anguishing over this. This is crazy. Nick Bawden. All right, so this is an easy one for me only because I already have it in my head that I'm cutting him. I just don't think he does anything necessarily any better than what we're seeing out of a guy like Jeremy Ruckert, who I think could fulfill that same role and at least still go out there and be a very capable tight end for us. So Nick Bawden is gone. We want a fullback. We have another way to get it on this team. Unfortunate. And I don't, maybe we try to practice squad him. Because I don't know if you trust Kenny Yeboah to also try to do that same role. And we have what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. We only have 4 practice squad spots left. Yeah, I don't know how that'll plan out. What's up?
What you doing?
YouTube. What's up?
Ready to do showers. Both babies are up.
Okay. I'll say Nick Bawden is probably a clear cut. All right, let me run through one more, and I am back to daddy duties. I will probably post where we're at with our actual depth chart so far. Maybe I'll separate this out into another live stream later tonight. I gotta see how I want to play that. Michael Carter. So I think as of right now, it's safe to say that he is running back 3 on this roster. Consistency wise, he looks more so like the player that we've seen his rookie year. While Bam Knight looks like he outperformed Michael Carter in training camp practices and in joint practices to a certain degree, Michael Carter has been more impressive in the games. So I don't know. To Boycott's argument before, thinking about which one you put more stock into, camp practices versus the preseason games, I think we'll probably let you know where you're leaning with that. But I would say I'm trusting Michael Carter. You think them keeping Amos has any impact on the linebacker room? Oh, I forgot. You can also reduce him down to the third linebacker if you wanted to over Jamien Sherwood. I think their defensive plan has a deciding factor as well, considering the Clark injury and non-Alexander signing. I think it can for sure. So I think Jamien Sherwood has definitely earned the confidence of the coaching staff. If there are any kind of reservations, though, then I think they still feel confident that Adrian Amos can come down and play that third linebacker spot. I don't know. It's weird, especially considering Jamien Sherwood has been able to play all 3 roles, so I'm sure they'll find a spot for them. But this is as close to a positionless defensive team as we'll probably see for the New York Jets in some time. So, yeah. Either way, though, appreciate you guys coming through. Again, probably in the next hour or 2, I'll decide if I'll end up doing the second part of this later tonight. If not, I'll find another time for it. But we built out a pretty decent roster so far. Don't think there's too many surprises. Again, I'll do a recap in the post though, and we'll see when I'll get this going again though. But peace.
I did it.